Well, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the first video entry on this channel. And as you can see, my name is Jeff Olson, and I represent Deep River Mental Health Fund. And essentially, what this channel is devoted to is educating caregivers on how to care for their mentally ill family members or friends. I come to you with a lot of experience in this area. On a personal note, my daughter, who is now 38 years old, was living in Missouri in 2011. And I got a phone call one day that she was suffering what we later found out to be psychosis. And she was imagining things, saw Satan in the room. It had all the markings of her being like a demonic possession. I live in Utah, and so I wasn't able to go to her right then, but she was able to come home, and that kind of started our journey. As I tell people all the time, I couldn't even spell the word psychiatrist when this all started with me. It's not something any of us really wanted or were prepared to deal with. Um, she came home. We didn't know where to go, what to do. We started getting a lot of advice from a lot of different people, and started the process of trying to find doctors, psychiatrists, medication, hospitals, you name it. It was very, very frustrating. And for the first few years, she spent a lot of time in and out of different mental health facilities. Some of the medications that she took helped one thing but caused three other things. We saw a lot of issues and a lot of problems. One of the biggest problems we had was she was very young at the time. She was 23, and we were we did not have a durable power of attorney or guardianship with her, and so HIPAA played a big part in us not being able to find out information about her once we did take her to the hospital. One episode in particular, she had had a pretty severe psychotic event, and we took her to the emergency room at a local hospital here in Utah. And at the time, they examined her. Ran a test, which I'll get into maybe in a later podcast. But um, she was not well. She was hallucinating, imagining things, didn't know who we were. Um, as I said, the only thing I can equate it to was it looked like a demonic possession. And so um, the hospital told us they couldn't take her. They didn't have room in their behavioral health unit. And so we had to work with our insurance to try to get her care. And the nearest facility and again, we didn't know anything about these facilities. We didn't know who the good ones were, who the bad ones were. And we finally found one that would accept our insurance. And that's really kind of what we had to go with. And so put her in an ambulance, and $1,000 later, the ambulance took her to a facility in the Salt Lake City area. When we followed the ambulance up there with her, they took her in this facility, and it was a behavioral health hospital. They said they specialize in this sort of thing. When we got in there, and you got to understand, here's my daughter, college student, uh, 22, 23 years old. Very, if you knew her, you would think she was just the epitome of a good kid. Just never had anything to say bad about anybody. Never broke the law, never shoplifted, just a really good kid. And we're sitting waiting to get her taken into this hospital and to register her. And at the same time, we realized that this facility was also the main facility where the Utah State Prison brought their mentally ill prisoners. And so here's my sweet little daughter, uh, who again we still didn't know what was wrong with her. We had no experience in this. And sitting down the bench from her were a number of convicts in orange jumpsuits, shackles, handcuffs, with police officers around them. So you can just imagine. the scenario that my wife and I were going through, just totally worried about my daughter, didn't know what to do. They pushed a paper in front of her and told her to sign it, and this was a document essentially that would have allowed my wife and I to have access to her treatment and let the doctors call us. Well, she was so out of it. They had given her medication at the previous in the emergency room. She couldn't even pick up the pen. She didn't even know what she was doing. So she couldn't sign the paper. Therefore, we had absolutely no access to her care. They took her behind this wall. Honestly, it looked like a prison. It was a bulletproof glass door. They took her, and we had no idea what they were going to do with her. And we just had to walk away. Um, they felt bad. We felt bad. But because of HIPAA, because of the law, and because we hadn't prepared to get, like I said, a durable power of attorney or something like that, we just had to go back out to our car and cross our fingers, and we didn't know what was going on. Um, and that's what I've understood a lot of people deal with. I have to also let all of you know that for approximately the past 14 years, I've been a volunteer with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. Some of you may have heard of it. I participated and also been a facilitator trainer for NAMI and conducted countless uh, sessions with people just like you, people like me, who are dealing with a mentally ill friend, family member, etc., and looking for answers. So it's with that background that I start this podcast and let you understand that I'm not just pontificating that I've lived it and I am living it right now, but through the 14 or so years that I've been dealing with this, I really felt like it was time for me to share from my experiences some tips, some help, and definitely some empathy for what you were going to. Um, as I said, we had no idea what we were doing. We had no idea what we were going through. Um, it was really rough. And in that first hospitalization, she was finally able to recover to the point that she was able to sign that document, which allowed us to visit and actually talk to the doctors on staff. What was really interesting during that time was she was seeing a psychiatrist. And when she had her that breakdown I mentioned when we had to take her to the hospital, we called that doctor and like because he had prescribed her some medication, and we are pretty sure that it was the medication that triggered a lot of her problems. Well, when we called the doctor, I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said, "Hey man, I'm not in an emergency room. It sounds like she's having problems. Good luck." You know, and that was about it. And I was like, "You bastard, you give her the drugs, and then when all hell breaks loose, you're not there to help us out." So that's why we ended up in the emergency room. And one thing, and maybe a lot of you have found this to be true, is there are a lot of people that don't know a whole lot. And people that are there to give advice and push medication and treatment and all the different things. And it's not that it's bad. It's just the first thing you have to understand is that everybody's different and everybody's treatment is different. Um, when I was in one of my NAMI groups, as a participant, there was a gentleman in my group that was also suffering from cancer. And about halfway through our family to family group session, he looked over at me and he said, "I'd much rather have cancer than mental illness because at least there's a treatment and it's a known treatment. And everybody can if you get cancer that there is are medications and treatments that you can take. With mental illness, hate to say it this way, but sometimes it's a crapshoot. Everybody's DNA is different. Everybody's brain is wired differently. What works for one may not work for another, and what works for one may cause more problems for another. And the side effects of the drugs can outweigh the benefit that they're supposed to be uh, helping with. So it was really hard, and we finally were able to intervene. We were able to get in. There are some other kind of personal things that happened in that first visit with my daughter, first hospital. stay that she had. She was in for about 2 weeks. And they were finally able to get her off all the medication that the previous doctor had given her. And found out that she had really low lithium levels. And that was one of the medications she actually still takes today. She's 38 years old now. Um, but we found that, that was one thing that helped. And we were able to get her stabilized and get her dismissed from the hospital. And that was really the first. I'll share more events as I do more podcasts, but that was really the catalyst that started us on our journey to understand mental illness and to accept the role as caregivers. And all of you that are listening to this that have had such an experience know that one of the first stages of dealing with becoming a caregiver or mental illness is there's that initial trauma, the initial shock. Something happens, some event happens, a psychotic event, a nervous breakdown, whatever it may be, that kind of slaps you in the face and wakes you up and say, this isn't going away. And boy, it's shocking, it's hard. You blame yourself. I blame myself. I thought I must have been a bad father. I must have missed something when she was young. Um, you start you get depressed. You search for answers. You're reaching out to anybody that you think might be able to help you. And that's the hardest thing is there's no one size fits all solution. Like as with cancer, you go to a cancer oncologist. Well, with mental illness, man, it really depends. And like I said, I'll go through a lot more of that as time goes on, but that's really where we started. My wife and I blamed ourselves. We were scratching our heads. We didn't know what was going on. I'm a fixer by nature, I, like most men are. I just wanted to get the right tool, the right pill, and hey, if we get this in her, it should fix the problem. Well, little to my knowledge, it's not like a cold. You can't just drink orange juice and take an antibiotic. Um, and it took me a long time to realize that this one isn't going away, that there isn't a real, cure for mental illness. So um, we brought her home and she stabilized and she was okay-ish. Um, but she started hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there, talking to people that weren't there. Very disturbing. We kept taking her to the doctor. They struggled to find a diagnosis, and that's the other thing is getting a diagnosis, man. It's key. It's one of the biggest things you should be doing. But a diagnosis is fluid. It can change, and ours did for sure. One of the first things they told us is that she was bipolar 1, and they started the doctor that we were taking her to at the time uh, started treating her for that, and really, and I'll just do a quote. I'm not going to tell you the source, but one of the doctors told us, well, we just have to get the right recipe of medication and get the right recipe that works. Well, that all sounds fine and good, but the battle that you go through while the medicine isn't working um, can be really traumatic. And there's a thing that we learned later on in one of her many hospitalizations is that there's a thing called saturation level, that it takes human body so many days or weeks to actually saturate the medication so it actually takes effect. So just the fact that you change the medication from one day to the next doesn't mean that they're immediately going to see a response. We didn't know that. And again, the things you learn, right? Um, but for the next, now that this is, like I said, back in 2011, 2012, um, she would be fine and then she'd have another breakdown. She would be fine for a little while, have another breakdown, and spent that first year in 4 different hospitals, probably 3 to 4 weeks per visit. Um, and it was really, really difficult, really stressful on my marriage, stressful on us as a family. It wasn't going away. And that's that second stage I was telling you about is you finally come to the realization after the trauma hits Second stage is you realize I got to deal with this. This isn't going away. And I've always said that, and I have no empirical data to base this on, but I've always said when you see the homeless people at the train station, or the bus depot, or down or in the streets of the city, chances are I would wager that most of them are there because they had no good caregiver, and there's probably a lot of mental illness involved there. And so the role of the caregiver is vital, is key, and I know it's not something you signed up for, not something I signed up for. I really thought when my daughter was a little girl that she was going to grow up and go to college, get married, have kids, make me a grandpa, and it was just kind of this idyllic um, life that I thought that I would have as a result of it, and that dream has vanished a long time ago. But so I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be a full-time caregiver to my adult daughter. So after that first experience, one of the first things my wife and I did is we well, we did two things. We went online. You can just go to like legalzoom.com. You can meet with an attorney if you'd rather. And we got a form called a durable power of attorney. Now there's a power of attorney and a durable power of attorney. The durable power of attorney is basically gives you the right to have say over their medication, their care, health, those kinds of things. Where power of attorney is more like distribution of assets, things like that. I'm not a lawyer, but this is what I learned. And that's one of the first things we did. Now, and the reason you want to get that, if you've got an older child or an adult child, is because you take them to the hospital. If they're 23, 24 years old, the hospital is just going to give you a big fat middle finger when you say, "Hey, I want to know how my daughter's doing and how my son is doing." They don't have to tell you because of HIPAA. But with that DPOA, durable power of attorney, you can hand that to them. Now, it has to be notarized and your loved one has to sign it. And essentially, they're going to say, yes, I'm giving my wife, husband, parent, whatever, right over my care. And I give them the right to be notified, when something happens to me or about my care in the hospital, whatever. So that may be difficult for you. If you've got a loved one who's belligerent, who doesn't want to, there are ways that you can talk to them. But that's the hardest part. Now, one of the nice thing is we got ours signed actually in when she was in the hospital, and the hospitals all have notary publics. So we just got it notarized while she was sitting in the hospital with us, and that saved our lives. My wife is an accountant by trade, and she made a dozen or so copies, and we put one in her file in every hospital that we visited in Utah. And so when we went in, we didn't have to have the paper; it was already in her file. And they knew us and they knew it well enough. And I'm sad to say that we had been to the hospitals enough that they knew who we were, but that's what we were dealing with. So again, since then, I've heard, I haven't done this myself because our situation's changed with my daughter, but some people have said guardianship is a better way to go. It is a lot more involved. You do have to go through the court to get that. It's a little harder, but you may want to look into that if that's something that you choose to do, but you would need to involve an attorney. And like I said, it does have to go through the courts. And what I've heard is that it's a lot harder for the loved one to agree to that because they're essentially signing their life over to you. But either way, you do need some sort of legal protection so that when you do encounter that situation, you are protected and backed up so that you can get the information you need and also be able to give information about their care. A couple of things I'm going to finish with. I'm going to try and keep this short. Um, as I said, my daughter initially was diagnosed with bipolar 1. In 2020, the last hospitalization that she went to, she was re-diagnosed with what is called schizoaffective disorder. A lot of people think it's schizo, but it's actually correctly pronounced it's schizo. Schizoaffective disorder, which is schizophrenia with bipolar. Um, And that's the diagnosis that we have now. I'm going to go in a little more detail the next time about um, medications, hospitalizations, kind of what to expect, what to look for, questions to ask. I'm putting all that together. But I also want to address a topic that I think is going to be sensitive to all of us, and that's the stigma. Now, here in Utah, generally speaking, the culture is if your neighbor, breaks their leg skiing, you take them a casserole. You know, the neighbors rally around, they bring you food, and everything's cool, right? Like Andy Griffith. Okay. Um, and what I will say is when my daughter was going through all of this, people don't bring casseroles to mentally ill people. Mental illness is so misunderstood. It's like a time bomb that nobody wants to touch. In fact, when we brought my daughter home the first time, she had uh, we had some neighbors that were friends of ours, and it was kind of funny because I was sitting with my daughter out on our front porch. It was a nice sunny day, and I was just sitting there. We were sitting in some chairs on the front porch, and this neighbor lady kind of walked up, and she was standing about 20 feet away from us, and she looked at me and she goes, "Can I talk to her?" Kind of like that. And I said, "Yeah, she's sitting right here." You know, um, it's hard for a lot of people, and I have to admit, I probably would have felt the same way had I not gone through what I went through. There is a stigma associated with it. Nobody wants it. The patients don't want it. The caregivers don't want to have to deal with it. Okay. Um, but people really misunderstand it, and they treat it like it's, like I said, a ticking time bomb. It is a treatable illness, and that's exactly what it is. It's not a curse. It's not something they've done wrong in their life. It's an illness, and it has biological components, has environmental components that we'll talk about. And I hate to kind of downplay it, but like a cold is an illness, okay? And you treat it. And mental illness is much the same thing. Treatment's a lot different. Treatment is hit and miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And there's a lot of pain and anguish that kind of goes along with it. But you'll deal with that. You'll deal with the stigma. Nobody wants nobody wants to deal with it. And the test I always say is, you know, what would happen if you walked up to a group of friends or people you work with and say, um, I have the flu. Yeah, they probably feel bad for you, tell you to go home, take it easy, drink lots of fluids, whatever. And now, what if you walked up to that same group and said, I'm mentally ill, I'm schizophrenic? How do you think they'd react? I think we know how they'd react. They wouldn't know how to react. They'd probably stay away from you. They probably wouldn't know what to say. They wouldn't want to set you off because they don't understand it. And that is one of the things that I'm here for. And that the reason that I'm doing these is to get the understanding out there that this is treatable. There are solutions available. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, believe me. And being the loved one who has to care for that person, it is an absolute labor of love, and it is thankless, and it's horrible at times. It's confusing. It makes you question everything. Um, it's sad. It's horrible. Some of the things that I've witnessed with my daughter, some of the things that I've been through, I would never want to repeat. But what I can say now is after 14 years dealing with this, I'm much better for it. And I have learned through all of this that I can deal with it and we can live with this and be happy. And so that's what this is all about, is helping you understand some of the tricks of the trade, I guess, if you will, that I've learned over the years on dealing with it. And as I said, the first thing, if you haven't done it yet, is look at your legal options. Get that DPOA, get the guardianship happening, because you just never know when you're going to need it. Um, One other thing, with regards to care facilities, I'm not sure what they're like where you are. The first one that we went to passed itself as a mental health facility, but it was actually a drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinic that kind of had a little bit of a mental health component to it. But so my sweet little daughter, who was hallucinating, was sitting in a room, and this facility was, as I said, number one, full of the prisoners from the Utah State Prison and a lot of people that were on drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And so be really careful, ask questions. You have the right. And don't take anything for granted. I mean, this is one of those things where, doctors are smart and they try really hard, and I'm not putting any of them down, but you have rights and you have rights to ask questions and you have rights to go somewhere else. And as you start getting to the point where you're looking for a psychiatrist or a mental health counselor, um, a nurse practitioner, whatever it is that you end up with, ask questions. We fired two or three psychiatrists before we found one that we felt was actually uh, doing a good job with us that fit our needs and personalities, and really that we felt like was helping my daughter. So that's okay. It's a job. They can make mistakes, and they may not be the right fit for you. So make sure you do that. So again, thank you for this. So I started a nonprofit because of this. My nonprofit is called Deep River Mental Health Consulting and Fund. And what we are, we're just starting out, but basically we exist to collect donations to help people who are struggling to pay for mental health care, because we know that insurance doesn't often cover it, even if people do have insurance. We're just getting it off the ground. Invite you to visit our website. You'll see it on my YouTube page. Um, and let us know what you think. Let me know in the comments if there are questions that you have or other topics that you'd like me to cover. As I said, I've been in this 14 years, been dealing with it a lot. And if chances are I've either experienced it or heard about it or dealt with people that are dealing with this. So thanks again. Uh, Best of luck. My heart and my prayers go out to you. If you're watching this, I know why you're watching it, and understand that I know exactly uh, where you're coming from. Thank you.